May I please invite Dr. Advait Edgoankar, Associate Professor in Institute of Forest Management, and he will be talking about effects of plastic waste on wildlife and ecosystem and what can be done.
Thank you, Avinash. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Right. So I can start off by saying very simply that we don't know what can be done. And so then now let me go ahead and we know the stats. We think that about 11 billion metric tons of plastic are there in the environment right now. Uh, we know that about 500 million tons of plastic are being put into the atmosphere into the system each year. Like you said, less than 10% is being recycled. There are some estimates that say up to 75 million or 75 trillion pieces of microplastics are there in the sea. Okay. When numbers get to be this big, human imagination boggles. I can't think of how big the 75 trillions is. It's just not in the human consciousness to figure out these things intuitively. So it turns out that it's a lot. And what are the effects of these? We can kind of are just beginning to understand the very the tip of the iceberg of what these effects are going to be like. And people are estimating that plastic is possibly killing millions of birds, lakhs of mammals, especially in the sea. Lakhs of fish are dying. What are the sublethal effects of these microplastics? We are only scraping the we don't really know. We know that possibly immune function is declining, reproductive rates are declining. uh, People say that you have in human beings, human animals, sperm counts have declined since the 1940s by a large factor. What these effects are going to be in another 50 years, is the human species going to be extinct? We have no clue. Okay, so it's uh, especially so if I have to restrict myself to talking about just the microplastics, of course, because it's not just the microplastics, it's the megaplastics also, which have urban waste management implications. But those that big plastic eventually turns out to become microplastic. And what this is doing is, and most of it in some point at some point in time is going to end up in the marine ecosystem. Even if it's in the middle of India, eventually it will kind of wend its way over 1,000 years perhaps into the marine ecosystem. And we know that whales, turtles, sharks, dolphins, seals are being affected by the bigger plastic pieces that we can see. But the microplastics are going into the phytoplankton and the zooplankton. And so the entire system, essentially all of life itself, is being penetrated, or whatever you want to call it, by these microplastics. Uh, is it going to have huge implications in terms of health? I suspect yes. All of us suspect yes. How much is it going to be? What is it going to be? We have absolutely no clue. And this is the case generally with most of wildlife questions. We generally have no clue of how these cycles play out. We know that it affects. There are these micro effects that happen, that change people's behavior, that change animal behavior, that change their ecosystem function. There's been one paper out recently that says that plastics are affecting planetary boundaries and all kinds of things. So it's affecting things that I normally would not have think of, like climate change, like biogeochemical cycles. So many things that are being affected. uh, how do we kind of deal with this? So one more thing that we talk about when we talk about plastics, we are actually talking about a lot of plastics plus the additive chemicals. People, there's one estimate that says about 13,000 chemicals are being used in these plastics as additives. And so far people have hazarded a guess that 3,200 of them approximately are of human health concern. These are just guesses at the moment, educated guesses. It could be a lot more. There are these endocrine disruptors, and there are these, things that lower immunity. There's in fact, an entirely new disease that is called plasticosis that has happened in seabirds, which is causing digestion problems and scarring in the intestines. This is, we are just discovering these things, and I'm sure as science progresses, we'll find out more. Uh, what we think of as plastics is actually thousands of variations of the structure, the shape, the chemicals, the size, which can cause various kinds of health issues. And the formula of many of these plastics are proprietary, and the companies that make them are not really willing to tell us. So we don't even know what the chemicals are in many places, what the combinations are. What I want to, I want to keep this, short so that we can think about this. I think that one way of what are the solutions? One is I don't know. We don't know what the solutions are. Uh, One way of thinking about this is not as a waste management problem, but if we can get it into the popular consciousness to think of it as a major health emergency rather than just a waste management problem. And so the kind of resources that the world put it into, solving the COVID issue, we should be thinking about those sorts of, resource, kind of utilization, or put it into that kind of a health emergency, because uh, diseases like COVID, while they are very nasty and have led to a lot of pain for the world, possibly would not have threatened humankind with extinction, while something like microplastics perhaps could. And I think if we can, get the social marketing people into this, and kind of make people realize that this is the kind of possible problem we are dealing with, I think then we could start thinking of figuring out how to tackle it. The other thing that I'll end kind of here with while programs like uh, taking personal responsibility for plastics are very good. I think they kind of miss the issue in terms of uh, the macro problems. I mean, we can do all the eco-friendly lifestyles that we want, and that perhaps might not change very much in terms of the global picture. So, I mean, while it is really important for us to do these, individual lifestyle changes, lobbying at the global level and those sorts of things and stuff that Sandeep Da could possibly tell us much more about, I think those would have a huger effect on how we pursue this. So I think that basically is what I wanted to say. It's again to reiterate how these things affect us. We really have no clue at the moment, except for very tantalizing glimpses of what nasty things can happen in terms of cancers, in terms of major health issues, in terms of population loss for wildlife. And I mean, it's all life, whether it's wildlife or whether it's human beings. We're all going to be affected very badly. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Advait. Definitely, you talked the impact of plastic waste on wildlife and ecosystem. Not only that, but you also highlighted a very important point that plastic as a waste management, we need to look further and we need to consider it as a health emergency. I think you articulated this problem very well, considering the magnitude of this problem. And you also suggested how the social marketing people can make influence, a very positive influence into it. And definitely lobbying at global level is very much required because this plastic waste is a global problem. So thank you so much for bringing all these very important points with very important